My name is Harper years old, and I'm a high-performing financial analyst, living a deliberately understated life in suburban Connecticut, a choice that has always infuriated my mother Eleanor. My success was measured by my balance sheet, but her success was always measured by appearances by the perceived affluence of our family's friends and the names on their guest lists. I'd spent months planning the perfect gift for her 50th birthday, not because I wanted to please her, but because I knew she'd use the occasion to publicly grade my affection and my financial worth. I had secured something incredibly rare, something she had coveted for years, and I'd wrapped it in plain, unassuming brown paper, a subtle rebellion against her love for gilded cages and excessive pomp. It was a calculated move, one designed to see if the value of the item itself could pierce the thick layer of status obsession that was my mother's entire personality. The moment she opened it, she didn't even look at the gift. She looked at the simple wrapping, the lack of sparkle, the absence of a giant designer logo on the box. In front of the 50 or so carefully selected guests, her face twisted with a theatrical disgust. Without hesitation, without even knowing what was inside the small heavy package, she hurled it back at me. It struck me squarely on the chest and dropped to the pristine patio pavers with a sickening thud. Cheap, miserly trash, she spat out, her voice dangerously calm, the accusation hanging heavy in the hot air as every single person froze. She had no idea how much I had actually spent or what that simple act would cost her. I stood there utterly still, watching her revel in the sudden silent authority she had established over the crowd. Instead of reacting with the expected shame or tears, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the single sheet of paper that documented the cold, brutal truth. I placed the receipt for the gift on a nearby glass table pressed flat by the summer breeze and walked away from the house, leaving behind the deafening silence of the crowd as they finally glanced at the numbers printed on that little slip of paper. Before we dive into the fallout from that single moment and what those numbers revealed, please let me know what time it is and what city you're watching from, just so I can see how far my story has traveled. If you've ever had to choose between your self-respect and family approval, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey toward complete independence. 2 years ago, when I met Nolan, I thought he was the ultimate escape from that suffocating control. He was 28, a talented freelance industrial designer, and while he was ambitious, his career lacked the established corporate prestige Eleanor demanded. My mother Eleanor had never hidden her disdain for my personal choices, especially any choice that prioritized genuine happiness or individual passion over her narrowly defined parameters of status and wealth. When I introduced her to Nolan, she didn't see a creative, kind man. She saw a risk, a variable she couldn't control or leverage in her social maneuvering. She was always quick with a backhanded compliment, or more often a direct insult about his unstable career path, reminding me that a woman in my position needed a partner with the safety of old money, not the uncertainty of new ideas. I knew her 50th birthday was going to be a monumental display of her importance, a curated event designed to solidify her standing among the other affluent families in our community, and the choice of gift was my last chance to try and connect on any level other than the transactional one she insisted on. I had found the very first edition of a rare limited-run piece of modernist sculpture she had been trying to acquire for her collection, a piece widely known to fetch a phenomenal price at auction due to its provenance and scarcity. The price tag was significant, amounting to $87,000, which I had paid in full, funding it entirely through smart, calculated investments rather than any of the trust funds she so frequently lorded over me. The piece was titled The Ascendant Form, ironically reflecting the very rise in social standing she craved. Knowing she would instantly judge the presentation before the content, I had instructed the dealer to remove all branding and wrap the sculpture in the most basic thick brown paper, tying it with simple white twine, a gesture I knew would read as passive aggression to her, but was to me a test of her superficiality. I watched her every time I visited, seeing the way she subtly minimized my achievements at work, while inflating the accomplishments of my cousins who had pursued far less challenging careers, but married men with impressive last names. My life felt like a performance where I constantly failed to meet the demanding script she had written for me, a script that required me to be decorative compliant and consistently elevating her perceived social standing. Nolan, meanwhile, offered weak resistance to her criticism, mostly just smiling awkwardly or changing the subject, a habit I now realize was less about politeness and more about a deeply ingrained fear of confrontation. I had hoped that this gift, this single object of undeniable luxury, would finally be the thing that silenced her, demonstrating my capability to meet her ridiculous standards while preserving my own method of living outside her spotlight. Looking back, I should have realized that nothing I did could ever satisfy a hunger that wasn't actually about wealth, but about absolute crushing control over everyone around her. My dad, George, a man who had long since withdrawn into a shell of quiet compliance, often told me to just humor her, but that was a compromise. I refused to make a lesson. He had learned the hard way. The incident happened on a Saturday afternoon at the party Mom organized in the expansive backyard, the place I usually felt the most suffocated. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and thinly veiled ambition, every conversation, a networking opportunity masquerading as small talk. Eleanor looked radiant in a sapphire dress, a flawless image of the society matriarch. She so desperately wished to be greeting guests with an air of practiced, detached elegance. The presentation of gifts was a choreographed spectacle, each one announced with a loud flourish, followed by Eleanor's assessment, which served less as gratitude and more as a public rating of the giver's taste and value. When my turn came, Nolan was standing nervously beside me, his hand resting lightly on my lower back, offering little comfort as I approached the table with the plain brown box. I could hear the immediate collective murmur of disapproval from the guests, their eyes trained on the simple wrapping contrasting sharply with the glistening silver paper and ornate bows of the preceding presents. Eleanor took the box with the tips of her fingers, handling it like something retrieved from a garbage chute, her smile instantly vanishing. "Oh, Harper," she drawled, her voice dripping with disappointed pity, calculated to make everyone believe she was bravely enduring my inadequacy. She paused, letting the silence magnify the offense of the humble wrapping, then tore away a piece of the brown paper, revealing only the dull, unpolished cardboard beneath. She didn't open the main box. She didn't need to. The wrapping alone was her evidence. "I suppose some people never understand that presenting a gift is as important as the gift itself," she announced to the room, not to me, her voice carrying easily over the muted jazz music. Then came the phrase, the cruel, sharp dagger meant to humiliate me completely. "Cheap, miserly trash!" She screamed, her composure cracking for a moment, the suppressed anger about my independent life finally boiling over. With an unexpected surge of aggressive energy, she threw the box, which held the heavy sculpture, right at my chest. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and the thud it made on the cobblestones was sickeningly loud, silencing the music and freezing the entire scene. Eleanor stood there, breathing heavily, a triumphant glint in her eyes, having successfully humiliated me into silence. But this time, the script changed. Instead of crumbling, I felt a glacial calm wash over me. I met her gaze, no emotion visible on my face, and slowly reached inside my jacket. My fingers closed around the folded-up receipt I had deliberately brought with me. I walked over to the glass-topped table where her champagne flute stood, carefully laid the white slip of paper flat so the numbers were visible, and weighted it down with a silver olive dish. Without a single word, Without looking at Nolan or anyone else, I turned and walked through the crowd, heading directly toward the street. Behind me, the collective gasp when the first few guests realized the seven-figure value of the gift she had just called trash was the last sound I heard before the gate clicked shut. In the car, the atmosphere was colder than my mother's demeanor just minutes before. I was driving my own car, having refused Eleanor's chauffeur service, a decision I was now eternally grateful for. The silence was heavy until Nolan finally cleared his throat, a small, weak sound that infuriated me more than Eleanor's scream. "Harper, why did you do that?" He asked, not a question of concern, but one of accusation. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, turning onto the interstate access road. Do what Nolan buy my mother the very piece of art she obsessed over for 3 years, or walk away when she physically assaulted me and publicly branded me as cheap trash? I challenged him, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion she had expected. He immediately began to deflect, employing the same avoidance tactics I had seen him use against Eleanor's critiques of his career. "You know how she is. You shouldn't have wrapped it that way. It was provocative, Harper. You should just let it go for her sake," he insisted, attempting to minimize her egregious behavior. That was the crucial moment, the turning point where I saw him not as my potential partner, but as another one of Eleanor's victims, a willing accomplice to his own emotional disarmament. I pulled the car over sharply into the shoulder of the highway, the tires crunching against the gravel. "No, Nolan." She threw a gift that cost $87,000 at my face, a gift that was a sincere attempt to show her that my success is real, but she only saw my packaging. My mother is not just how she is. She is manipulative and cruel." I looked at him directly, demanding a response that wasn't a platitude. "I need you to tell me right now, clearly, without equivocation. Are you on my side? Or are you prioritizing the comfort of keeping the peace with my mother?" His silence was an answer in itself. He looked away, fiddling with his seatbelt buckle, his jaw working as he tried to construct a neutral statement. "She's your mother, Harper. It's messy, but we need to keep things smooth for your dad's sake, for my career's potential networking." He trailed off, already negotiating my dignity for potential future gains. The mention of my dad, George, who had retreated from the conflict years ago, only served to harden my resolve. I realized that my attempts to integrate Nolan into my family life had merely exposed his deep-seated fear of social discomfort and his preference for superficial stability over genuine moral courage. I had hoped for a hero, or at least an equal partner, but I was staring at a scared man whose first instinct was to prioritize the illusion of tranquility. I didn't raise my voice again. The cold certainty that settled in my stomach was far more powerful than any shouting match. "Get out of the car, Nolan. I'll call a ride for you," I stated calmly, knowing the relationship had just died a sudden, undignified death on the side of the interstate. In the days that followed, the pressure from Mom was no longer veiled hints, but a clear tactical maneuver. Her immediate strategy, which she always used when someone challenged her narrative, was isolation. First, she called my father's attorney a family friend who handled our less complex affairs, demanding a clarification of my financial standing, implying I had recklessly spent money and should be cut off from any familial assistance. George, bless his compliant heart, simply told her to handle it herself, providing the first tiny crack in her armor of control. Next, she focused her full manipulative attention on Nolan, leveraging his deep-seated need for approval and social validation. Nolan started calling me constantly, not to apologize, but to relay Eleanor's latest demands. I needed to apologize for ruining her party, retrieve the expensive gift she had rejected, and publicly explain that the receipt was a misunderstanding. He didn't seem to grasp the irony of demanding I apologize for a gift that was called trash, or the fact that he was acting as his own messenger, delivering his own death warrant. During a particularly tense phone call that Friday, Nolan proposed we take a break, citing the extreme emotional pressure and my overreaction as the cause. His words lacked conviction, clearly echoing the demands Eleanor must have drilled into him. "I just need things to calm down, Harper. I can't handle the drama." He whined perfectly, confirming my earlier realization of his spinelessness. The relationship was already dead, but I needed to administer the final conscious blow for my own clarity and for the record. I arranged to meet him at a discreet coffee shop downtown the following morning. The meeting was brief, carried out over lukewarm black coffee conducted with the cold professionalism I usually reserved for aggressive corporate negotiations. I looked him in the eye, noting the exhaustion and fear etched on his face, the price he was already paying for his compliance. "Nolan," I said, putting my mug down with a deliberate click, "you have a choice, and this is the only one I am offering. You choose integrity, and the truth standing up for yourself and me against her emotional control, or you choose Mother and the comforting illusion of stability she offers, knowing that stability comes with a very heavy price tag: your independence." This was my final ultimatum, the ultimate challenge of character. He squirmed in his seat, his gaze darting around the crowded room, unable to meet mine. I I just think we need more time to process. She's just worried about appearances, about the gossip. It's complicated, Harper. We can talk about this later. His non-answer was once again the definitive one, a perfect display of his inability to choose an uncomfortable truth over a convenient lie. I knew then that there was no later for us. I stood up, left a $20 bill on the table to cover the 2 coffees, and walked away, without looking back, knowing I had just severed the last weakest thread connecting me to Eleanor's suffocating world. In the midst of the distance growing between Nolan and me, due to these invisible pressures, I received an unexpected call from Chloe, my younger sister. Chloe, 24, was a graduate student in literature, but she was rapidly realizing that her life trajectory was also being mapped out without her consent by Eleanor. "Harper, you have to help me," she whispered frantically over the phone, the urgency in her voice shattering my self-imposed emotional quarantine. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Eleanor actively fostered competition and distance between us, ensuring neither of us presented a united front. Chloe revealed that Eleanor had intensified her manipulation since the party incident, using the chaos as an excuse to tighten her grip. Eleanor was not only spreading rumors about me, saying I was unstable, financially reckless, and had intentionally sought to embarrass her, but she had also doubled down on Chloe's future. The current demand was for Chloe to abandon her doctoral studies and immediately marry the son of a family friend, a man with significant generational wealth, but whom Chloe openly disliked purely to repair the family's standing after Harper's disgraceful spectacle. Chloe's confession was painful, detailing a life lived under the constant threat of disapproval, with every decision scrutinized and controlled, confirming that Eleanor's behavior was a deep, toxic pattern, not an isolated incident related to a birthday gift. She had watched my dramatic exit with the receipt, and instead of judging me, she had seen a spark of defiance, an impossible escape route. Hearing Chloe's distress galvanized me, shifting my focus from the self-pity of a broken relationship to the responsibility of saving my sister from the same emotional prison I was escaping. I promised her safe harbor and began planning her extraction, immediately securing a separate small apartment downtown that I could easily manage, an independent space where she could finish her dissertation without fear of discovery. Meanwhile, Eleanor's campaign of disinformation was in full swing. She told our social circle through carefully worded leaks to women like Mrs. Caldwell, the neighborhood's chief gossip conduit, that I was suffering from a breakdown brought on by financial stress, and that the high-value receipt was nothing more than a forgery intended to hurt her. She presented herself as the suffering martyr, the mother abandoned by her unstable child. Her plan was nearly perfect, relying entirely on the assumption that no one would dare question the matriarch of the family or believe the word of the supposed villain. She underestimated the power of 2 crucial elements: the meticulous documentation I had kept of my own finances, and the simple fact that among those 50 guests were a few individuals who, despite their wealth, possessed a basic level of moral curiosity, like my college friend Marcus, who was present with his partner Sophie. The stage was set not just for a family argument, but for a public reckoning that would expose the fragile facade Eleanor had built around herself. A week later, the numbers on that receipt began creating a chain reaction within Mother's social circle. Marcus, who had discreetly picked up the discarded paper after the commotion settled, had verified the authenticity of the artwork and the transaction with the prestigious gallery. He and Sophie then became my unwitting yet highly effective PR agents. They didn't spread gossip. They simply stated the factual truth whenever Eleanor's rumors about my forged receipt came up. Harper paid $87,000 for that sculpture. Marcus would state simply, Eleanor threw it at her because the wrapping wasn't shiny enough. The simplicity of the facts was devastating. The story wasn't about a child disrespecting a mother. It was about a woman so blinded by her obsession with appearance and status that she physically rejected a gift of exceptional value because it didn't align with her script for public performance. The social response was instantaneous and brutal, the swift condemnation unique to affluent communities where reputation is currency. Suddenly, the narrative of Eleanor the martyr collapsed, replaced by the image of Eleanor the greedy fool. Invitations to exclusive events began to dry up, and the polite but distant greetings she received shifted to outright avoidance. The receipt had not just recorded a transaction, it had documented her toxic character. I decided this was the moment to finalize the separation. I sent a registered letter to Eleanor and George clearly stating my intention to formally and permanently sever all familial legal and financial ties. I made it clear that any future communication must go through my attorney, whose contact information was prominently listed. To Nolan, I sent a concise one-line email. The ultimatum has passed and your choice was clear. This is over. He immediately called, begging for a chance to explain, claiming Eleanor was now criticizing him for his lack of control over me, proving once again his inability to prioritize integrity. I simply blocked his number, closing the door on that chapter of my life, forever. The sense of freedom was profound, a weight lifted that I hadn't realized I was carrying for 27 years. The full truth of the gift that the sculpture was an 8-figure asset when evaluated by an independent appraiser after the sale, due to a recent artist retrospective, was something Eleanor would eventually learn, but by then the actual monetary value would be the least of her losses. My focus was now solely on creating a life defined by my own values, and more importantly, on helping Chloe escape the same prison. As the months passed, everything changed in ways I had never dared to imagine. The fallout for Eleanor was not dramatic, but it was relentless and thoroughly American, a slow, agonizing erosion of her social capital and financial stability. The loss of face was devastating in her world. Clients began quietly shifting their accounts away from George's family law firm, fearing association with a woman labeled publicly as impulsive and deceitful. Eleanor's social network, the very thing she valued above all else, evaporated, leaving her isolated and bitter, turning her constant need for control inward toward George, who simply retreated further into his private misery. The ultimate consequence was the discovery that the art piece Eleanor threw was actually worth substantially more than the $87,000 I paid a value, now estimated at approximately $150,000, due to a museum acquisition of a similar work. The sculpture, which she eventually sold in a panic for a fraction of its true worth, became a perpetual symbol of her catastrophic short-sightedness. Nolan, stripped of the prestige of association with my family and the stability he craved, eventually lost a major client and saw his freelance career begin to flounder without Eleanor's indirect networking opportunities. He reached out one final time, attempting a clumsy apology and expressing regret for choosing her temporary peace. But I had already moved past the point of forgiveness or even resentment. I simply deleted the message, recognizing it as another transactional bid for comfort, not genuine remorse. Chloe, thanks to the independent apartment I secured, completed her dissertation in peace, finally escaping Eleanor's stifling influence. She found an academic position and now lives freely her success, a direct counter-narrative to Eleanor's failed attempt to control her. We built a real, supportive sisterhood, one founded on shared experience and mutual respect, completely devoid of performance or expectation. For me, cutting off Eleanor was the single most liberating action of my life. I didn't win the battle through reconciliation. I won it through definitive permanent separation and by exposing the truth she tried to bury with manipulation. I sold the ascendant form after its value stabilized, using the substantial profit to invest in my sister's future and my own, a final act of transforming her toxic greed into genuine constructive wealth. The greatest value in my story isn't the money on the receipt. It's the realization that you cannot negotiate with toxic behavior, and that the only way to win is to walk away fully and without compromise. The numbers on that receipt didn't just silence a room, they were the price tag of my freedom. The lesson I want you to take from my experience is this: your self-worth is not up for negotiation, and the most valuable currency in life is not wealth, but the courage to draw a boundary. Never sacrifice your peace for someone else's performance. Know your value, document your truth, and be prepared to use both to walk away from any toxic relationship that diminishes you.